Mark, we're so excited you're here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it's funny because we've actually had quite a few financial professionals on here, CPAs, but Joe, I feel like every time we do, we still get new information that we're like, oh my gosh, that is mind blowing. I didn't think about that. And so I love having financial professionals on because you always seem to have a little bit of a unique take, unique recommendation. And so I'm so curious to see where this conversation goes. And I kind of just want to start from the beginning. Our audience is primarily made up of aspiring solopreneurs. So you have people that are wanting to leave their job and just haven't yet, and they want to be a solopreneur, or they're just getting started. So let's start from the basics. What would you say is the best way solopreneurs can set themselves up for financial success from the get-go?
Great question. Well, when you look at entity structuring, usually that's a question that they're going to have. Should I be a sole proprietor? Should I be an LLC? Should I do a subchapter S election? If they're going to be a solopreneur, the first thing that I would look at is, possibly doing a subchapter S election on an LLC, right? They need an LLC for asset protection. They want their business. I would recommend that they put their business in some type of entity structure just to protect their personal assets from litigation. Now the question is, okay, now that they have this entity structure, why would they potentially want to make it a subchapter S? Well, if they make it a subchapter S, this nasty little thing called employment tax, you might get some reprieve, right? So essentially, depending on what you can justify your salary to be as a solopreneur, well, all the way up to, say you give yourself a $60,000 a year salary, if you can justify that. Well, everything above 60,000 to the threshold of 168 or 170 is not going to have an employment tax. That's 15%. So essentially, think about that. All the way up to around $168,000, every dollar that comes to you, if you're in a regular LLC or sole proprietorship, you're paying employment tax. So with a subchapter S election, you can potentially shave off that 15% employment tax liability on a portion of your dollars, so long as you can justify that you're paying yourself enough salary, right? If you're...
Well, yeah, this is, we're getting into the melting brain mode here, Carly. So this is new to me. So you're saying that if you can say that 60,000 is reasonable for what I'm doing, but I just made $160,000 this year, so that other 100,000 I'm going to just take as a distribution, that can be taken without the 15% of self-employment tax.
100%. That is exactly right. So the question then becomes making sure you can justify that you're paying yourself a salary that's commensurate with other solopreneurs that are in your space. But it could be a significant tax efficiency, because that's 15% adds up, because if they're as a solopreneur, you're either sole proprietor or LLC, you're paying 15% employment tax on everything up to $168,000. So if you can shave that down with the S Corp election, it really helps. So that's one. There's a few other things that you can do as well, but I think that's probably the first kind of step one, entity structure.
And that's true in all states?
Yes.
True in all. Okay. Wow. Excellent.
Yeah, because we're spread out across the board here. I'm in the Rockies. You guys are East Coast. So we're covering our bases. So that was step one. What is step two?
Yeah, step two, as far as I would say that let's continue down this path of entity structure. Are you utilizing the coupons that are appropriate for what you do? And with the subchapter S election, your business now becomes a third party or a third person. So it's interesting now that you have a business. Like if you're an LLC, you're a single member disregarded LLC. Well, then that's just an extension of you. But if you get an LLC and you decide to make it a subchapter S election, it becomes this whole new entity. It's an individual. It's as far as the legalese, like when they're looking at the entity, you've got owner A and the S Corp election. That's a completely separate entity and an independent individual in the mind of the federal government. So now that you have this business that you own, that's an additional entity, Well, did you know that you can rent your home to a third party up to a certain number of days per year, and the rent that you receive from that third party is not taxable? Well, that's a great thing for solopreneurs to do. If they have a Subchapter S election and now they have an entity that they can rent their home to, well, that's tax-free income up to a certain number of days per year, as long as you can justify it. So where do you have your board of director meeting? Where do you have your fiscal responsibility meeting? Where do you have your marketing strategy meetings? Where do you have your, whatever business growth specific meeting? Well, you have it at your house. Why? Because you can charge your business rent, and that rent that comes for your business is a deduction to the business, right? So less profit from the business and not taxable to the business owner, because you're following two tax codes that have been around for about 60 years.
Now, if the business involved seeing people in person, say we have a lot of coaches, and a lot of them are virtual now, but some see people in person, and that person came to the house, would they be able to just basically have a monthly rent that they charge their business in order to have access to that part of the house in order to host it, as opposed to event driven?
Yes, that's a great question, Joe, because we're looking at two different applications of code. One would be more or less maybe you have an office space in your home and you're carving out that office space and taking a deduction for that office space. So now if they have clients over, they're going to be having a meeting in that office space, and that's going to give them that deduction. But where we're going now is if they do have that person over for a meeting in their home, the income is not taxable up to the certain amount of days per year that are allowable. So essentially every day above that, they're losing their tax efficiency on that. So I think that the key here is balancing it out and saying, what do I want to use my home for? And is it more appropriate for me to use my home for this tax-free income up to a certain number of days per year? And after that, maybe you don't use your home anymore. Or if you do, you just don't take a benefit for it, right? Because you don't get as much benefit as you would if you used the rule. So
this is the second time I've heard about this actually in the past month, and I hadn't heard of this prior. And I'm just like, there's so many things us solopreneurs just don't know what we don't know. So I'm so glad you're answering some of these questions. Are there any other strategies that people should be thinking about from a tax saving standpoint?
Those for solopreneurs, those are generally the right out of the gate, the best ones that I like to talk about. Paying your kids is also really important as well. So if you've got kids that are old enough to actually start doing some meaningful tasks, then paying them is great because they have up to $14,600 per year. There's no income tax for them. So now you're only paying employment tax unless you pay them from a specific entity. Now you can avoid the employment tax too. So there's different ways to look at that.
When you say meaningful tasks, do you mean like something that 12-year-olds could handle or like a 5-year-old could handle, even if it's beneficial to the business? Like, is there an actual age?
Why are you asking about a 5-year-old, Carly?
I think somebody just had a kindergarten graduation. Great question. So here's the thing. If you're going to pay your children, there's an income tax efficiency there, right? It could be zero tax, and that includes zero employment tax if it's paid from the right kind of structure. But if you do have a Subchapter S and you're actually getting to do stuff for your business, well, it's a deduction to your business and it's not taxable to your child, but there is an employment tax that has to be paid. So, obviously you're getting income to the family that is void of federal and possibly state, if you live in a state that has state income tax. But that being said, you're not going to put on the docket. I had my 5-year-old do marketing research and R&D. Right?
She's really bright.
But what you could do, Carly, is you could give your cute little 5-year-old a royalty agreement and start putting her images on your marketing collateral. So now you've got, like maybe on your website, your marketing collateral, you have her images and you're paying her an annual royalty just for her cute little face on some of your marketing material. And that's an easy one. So then you don't have to keep track of how many hours they worked. A 5-year-old can shred paper. Shredding. I mean, if you get a third-party shredding company, that's going to be $200-$300 a month to come shred your papers So you could pay your 5-year-old $200 or $300 a month just to shred paper, when you need to. So those are things that you just have to be able to justify that it's reasonable to pay them what you're paying them, and they actually can accomplish the task. It's not out of reason to say that they can't do it.
Interesting. So there are, because for me, I think of child labor laws and all of that. And I didn't know where that played into everything. Because it's even hard to find volunteer work for that age now, let alone a real job. Wow, fascinating. All right, that's good to know. And you also, Mark, you have mentioned that there is a way to get the IRS to fund a portion of their retirement or of a solopreneur's retirement 100% tax-free. Is that one of the things we've already talked about, or is that a whole separate scenario?
Well, it's interesting. We've talked about a part of it, right? Because there are 75,000 pages of tax code. There's lots of coupons. When I say coupons, I'm talking about tax codes that you can apply, and following that code to get that efficiency, it's also giving you a tax benefit. So I've talked about pay the kids. I've talked about, subchapter S election to, kind of lower your salary. So you're saving employment tax on the amount above salary between. I've talked about, renting your home to your S Corp, right? So those are 3 things. Now there's many other things that you can do. It's just that how much income do you have? And taxes is net zero game, because once you start getting down in the lower tax bracket, sometimes it becomes less efficient to do anything. But to your point, where I was going with the federal government funding your tax-free retirement is, well, let's just say you did rent your house to your business for the allotted number of days per year, and you did pay your child for the shredding per month and the royalty fee, and you did save taxes, right, on the subchapter S selection of the salary. So maybe say literally on an annual basis, that saves you $15,000 in taxes. Just making a number up. It could be a little more, it could be a little bit less, depending on the state and all the variables. So now think about it. That's $15,000 that the federal government or the state just funded towards your retirement, right? Because there's less taxes you paid by following their rules. Now here, how do you make it a tax-free, right? Because now you didn't pay taxes on or you saved $15,000 in tax, but now you need to invest it. So that's where you go with, do you put it in a Roth if you still can? If you make too much money, you can't put it in a Roth, but you could probably put it in a Roth for your child if you want to take care of them in the future. But the other side is if you start getting into insurance, right? For decades and decades, wealthy individuals have used properly structured insurance to shelter future income. So let's just say you took $15,000 a year of tax savings through these 3 strategies, and you put it into a cash value life insurance policy that's essentially maximizing the cash and minimizing the death benefit. What it's doing is giving you an alternative savings bucket, and it's going to give you usually 4 to 6% compound return over time. But you're not paying taxes on it anymore because you're not paying taxes on the gains. And when you access the cash value, you just take a loan from your policy. So that's where you can take that 10 or 15 or 20, or maybe if you're saving 50 or 60 or $70,000 a year, 150, wherever the goes with regard to your income, start shifting that into either, Roth buckets or backdoor Roth. You can go IRA first, and you can go into the backdoor, which is interesting, or go into like a cash value life insurance. But I don't usually go there because I'm not really managing money. I'm not telling people how to shepherd their money. That's my client does that. Most of my clients come from financial advisors and tax professionals. So they're bringing me into the equation to add these additional layers of tax efficiency.
Okay, so I'm so glad you said that, because let's say we have a person listening right now and they're like, I'm really good at baking pies. I went out on my own to start a pie business. You just spoke a foreign language for the past 10 minutes. I have no idea what you were just talking about, but I need to know what types of professionals should people hire if they just don't know anything about money? And how often should they meet with each of these people?
Awesome question, Carly. Well, just financially speaking, I usually recommend a good bookkeeper, right? Because they're well worth their amount of payment. Because most people, especially small business owners, they're running all over the place, just getting their business organized, growing their growing their marketing list, growing their client base, and all of a sudden it's like December and they have no record keeping. They just have things on scratch pieces of paper, and so getting a good bookkeeper to really keep up with their expenses and their income on a month-to-month basis is going to be key. And then, of course, the layer above that would be who's going to do your tax preparation and filing, right? So now you know your numbers. Now you need somebody that knows what to do with those numbers, right? Because it's just now they're saying, okay, well, we've got these numbers. How about we look at A, B, and C with regard to making sure that you don't overpay in tax? So bookkeeper, good CPA, those are the first two. And then you start going into, once you start making pretty good money, then you might want to start bringing me into the equation, right? Because I'm not going to be doing the tax prep and the tax filing. I'm going to be saying, hey, these are the things that your average CPA or even your above average CPA just don't have the bandwidth to know, because there's just too much for one. You can't be, what do you say, jack of all trades, master of none. So CPAs have enough on their plate just to stay compliant and making sure that they're keeping up with all their workload and preparation and filing. Whereas when you start making more income, you need to bring that additional layer. So I'd say bookkeeper, CPA, and then bring me in when that tax bill starts creeping up. And outside of that, you always want a good financial advisor, right? Somebody that can say, hey, what should you do with your profits? The amount that you don't need for your lifestyle,
And Mark, for people who haven't read your bio yet or anything, can you tell them what you are, just so that they know the third person they need to hire in this equation?
Yes. I've labeled myself a tax savings architect because there's not a lot of individuals in my space that are doing what I'm doing. And really, when it comes to reducing your tax liability, there's 75,000 pages of tax code. There's a lot in there that says, hey, if you do this, you can actually get a tax benefit. If you do that, you can actually get a tax benefit. The question is, where are all these coupons, right? They're in there. And do they apply to you, your business, based off of what you're doing or what your income level is? Does it make sense for you to start another business that ultimately will reduce taxes in your current business? So there's all these things that's my focus. As I go out there and I explore, I do diligence, I vet, and once I find these coupons, I put them in my toolbox, and essentially when the CPA or the financial advisor or the business owner comes to me directly and says, hey, what more can I do? Because I've been to my general practitioner, right? I've gone to my family physician, and this is doing whatever I can, but I've got this headache that won't keep going away. Maybe I should see a neurologist, right? I'm kind of like the neurologist coming in and say, hey, let me help you and your general practitioner add some efficiencies that are going to take away some of this pain. And we're talking about tax pain, essentially. So
Sure. Well, so the other question I had is, you said after you would be like a financial advisor if you're making good money, but that is a very subjective number, I feel like, for people. So what number does it make sense for people to talk to an advisor?
Well, that's a good question, Carly. And thank you for asking it, because really with the advisors, it doesn't even matter. I mean, if you have $10 of net profit above your expenses, if you don't know what you should be doing with it, get a financial advisor that you can trust. And, there's a lot of noise in the space on that. Someone you trust that's highly ethical, but also highly knowledgeable is key. And really, when you're looking at that, I'm not saying that a financial advisor that's not a registered investment advisor is not a phenomenal way to go. But when you have a registered investment advisor, they have a fiduciary responsibility to essentially give you the information, and they have to disclose to you what they're getting compensated on and what they're not. And a lot of them are fee-based these days, where literally you're paying them a fee just to give you some guidance, just the same you paid for anyone, a personal trainer, et cetera. Show me how to do a workout. And they're giving you the best things that you can do based on you. And they're not trying to push you into this mutual fund or this treasury or this type of whatever it is that they get compensated on. So financial advisors, the minute you have more money than you need to spend on your lifestyle, that's when you get the right person in place, because you want it to grow, right? You want that to grow. But when it comes to tax efficiency, that would be bringing me in above and beyond your CPA. I'd say if you're long as you're paying 25 grand or more in tax per year, then it's probably a good idea to start bringing that extra layer of efficiency on top of your CPA to say, what am I missing? Not that my CPA is doing a bad job. It's just that what else is out there that they don't have time to go find, that I might be using.
Yeah. Well, so let's marry your two roles, because for an advisor, they'll help with retirement and everything, but there are tax benefits with some retirement strategies. And what would you recommend for a solopreneur when it comes to retirement savings from a tax perspective?
Yes. So retirement wise, I'm a big advocate of getting taxed on the seed, not the harvest. Therefore, when they're saving their dollars now, maybe just get the taxes out of the way and put the money into a bucket that they never have to pay the taxes again. So as a solopreneur, you can do like a solo 401k, right? So now you do at a solo 401k, you can actually have a Roth bucket. And now, even if you make more than the allotted amount of income, because you start getting phased out, the more income you have, they won't let you do a Roth, right? Because the IRS the federal government knows that there's going to be a bigger harvest at the end. So that's where you could integrate, like say a Roth 401k, pay the taxes now and never pay the taxes again. Because once you start making more and more income, there's going to be less and less ways for you to do that outside of cash value life insurance and some type of Roth option that, again, phases out as you make more income. So I'd say that right out of the gate, just make sure that you're putting money in these tax deferred structures so you can at least put that money to work for you. But at the end of the rainbow, you want to, what does that outcome look like? And I'm a big advocate of just kind of getting the taxes over with now and never paying them again.
So let me ask you this question. Maybe this is better for bookkeeper, but I think you could shed some light. Let's say people are like, Mark, I hear what you're saying. I trust everything you're saying. This is great advice. However, I'm a new solopreneur and I have clients right now, but I don't know if I'll have them next month. And it like my client base ebbs and flows. From a cash flow standpoint, do you have any recommendations on when to put stuff towards savings, when to put stuff back into your business, when to go on vacation, like how to pay yourself basically? Like there's a lot to juggle. And I think people have great intentions sometimes, but just don't have the money to do them.
Well, that's when, you have to think about how important is it for you to grow your business and be successful. And certain things that you're not doing could potentially be creating to your lack of success, right? So now you have to think about, well, wow, do I really need a bookkeeper yet? Well, interestingly enough, when you outsource, there's a lot of great opportunities for low-cost bookkeepers on an outsourced basis. So just because they're not your neighbor that is charging a U.S. rate doesn't mean they're not a phenomenal bookkeeper. And also you can go with part-time. Like I only need you to do bookkeeping for me 1 day a month. It might be an hour this month. It might be 3 hours next month. Depends on how much volume of business I did, how much data I'm giving you. So that's where I think those types of things, like you really need to measure your business to be able to efficiently grow. So that's the things I would be less hesitant to skimp on, right? Oh, I don't need a bookkeeper. I don't really need to keep up with how much I'm spending and how much I'm making and what am I spending it on and what times. Because when you have that data, it's like an amazing opportunity to see, how can you adjust efficiently, right? If you can't measure something, how can you expect to grow, right? I don't even know where I am. You're not measuring it. You've got to basically be able to measure it and then determine, am I growing from that?
Sure. Oh my gosh, so much information, Joe. So Mark, full disclosure, before you hopped on, I was like, Joe, we have another financial professional. We'll see how the conversation goes, decide if we're going to keep it or not. Since you're a keeper. Mark, you're a keeper. So much good information in here. I feel like we could talk about this for hours. But we ask all of our guests this question. So I want to wrap everything up with this. What is your favorite quote about success?
I'm a big Henry Ford fan. I like what he did with the T model and just scaling. And, he has a great quote that's, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're always going to be right. So mindset is super important. So I like that one a lot.
I love that. And I think it's very important for this conversation as well. So, Mark, this has been so great. You are, like you said, not a lot of people do what you do. Can you take on clients that are not in Florida? How does that work? Like if people wanted to work with you, are they able to?
Absolutely. I work with clients in all 50 states. Sometimes I'll get international clients to call and I'm like, unless you have a US based tax bill, I'm not at the point where we're looking at, tax law in your country. So I'm sticking to the US right now. We've got 75,000 pages that I still have to. So any state and, essentially sometimes the first, 20-minute consultation is complimentary. So feel free to go to our website, taxwisepartners.com. Again, taxwisepartners.com. And you can learn a little bit about us. If you don't want to talk to me yet, just, send us some information about you. We can do a little send you some case studies and maybe a little, hey, this is your tax savings kind of window from what we see based on the information you provided. And of course, if you want to schedule something, we've got a calendar there. You literally just find a time and date that works for them, whether it be phone call or Zoom, and book it. And it's no fee to just chat with us for, the first 20 minutes or so. And 30 minutes just to see what we can do for you.
Wonderful. Great. Well, I need to go find some papers for a 5-year-old to shred. So appreciate this conversation. And Mark, come back whenever. This has been such a great interview.
Yeah, really, really great stuff. Like, I don't usually get surprised on these conversations, and this was a good one.
Joe, Carly, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
And listeners, we hope you enjoyed it just as much as we did, per usual. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us that 5-star review. Subscribe to YouTube, subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. We just love the follows. We love that attention because it keeps us going with what we love. Anyway, we will see you next time on The Aspiring Solopreneur. Have a good day.